Elden Ring's DLC made fire damage very good with the oil-soaked tier. By now we all know that. But the DLC also introduced another item for fire damage, a severely underrated item, and that is the Hefty oil pot, and I think in a lot of applications it is much better than the oil-soaked tier. Let me explain, starting with the oil-soaked tier. Some of you might recall pretty early into the DLC, I started experimenting with the oil-soaked tier and released a setup on a faith build with flame art patas using the oil-soaked tier. And this turned out to be a very good choice for a weapon because I found out through using it, the way the oil-soaked tier works is it constantly procs oil on a person, but then when you burn the oil off of them, there's sort of a cooldown before they will proc the oil again. And of course, you have to be kind of close to them for the oil to proc. So this serves the Pata very well because the Pata running R2 true combo, which is what I was running, obviously burns the oil at the onset, they get stun locked, and then by the time you hit them with that final neutral R2, they've been stunned for enough time that the oil is applied again, and then you chase them down for one final running attack, and by the time that running attack hits, you guessed it, they're oiled up again. So I realized I needed a little bit of time in between hits to reapply the oil, and I started thinking about slower, higher fire damage weapons, and the Fire Knight Greatsword was the obvious choice. So I started using that with the oil-soaked tier, and as we could expect, it was a very good setup. It was very strong, the R1s hit very hard, and it typically ended the fight in 3 hits, often 2 if they didn't level their vigor. And I started to think, is there a way I can make the fire damage hit harder so I only have to swing twice? And I looked towards the Hefty pots, I tried them out, and I will never go back. The reason for this is the Hefty pots give you a huge fire bonus damage, 65%, which is much higher than the oil-soaked tier. And yes, it only procs once, it doesn't have the ability to proc oil a bunch of times like the crystal tier, but it doesn't matter because you're hitting for 1500 damage with neutral R1s, so you really only need to hit it once with the oil on, and then any normal attack will finish the fight. So that is a 2-shot finisher, which is perfect, exactly what I was looking for. And on top of that, the Hefty oil pot is different from the regular oil pot. Yes, it is stronger, but it also has a generous amount of splash damage. If you are pretty good with your free aims, it will not be hard to hit people with this oil pot. It's pretty consistent. So it is a totally solid choice for invasions or whatever to use this. And as a final benefit, it frees up a slot in your Wondrous Physics, so you could use something like the Flame Shroud tier while still getting the benefits of the oil. The build I'm using is nothing special. It's just a straight up faith build. Get your strength and dex to the minimum requirements, 60 vigor, dump the rest into endurance. You'll see I'm running it at 167, which is the highest I can invade, 150, which is a common level that people play through the DLC in. So that's why I'm that level. But you can obviously replicate this at meta level with fewer dump stats, etc. The talismans don't matter too much. Just make sure you've got the talismans set up so that your build works. And then, I had extra slots, so I threw the spear and 2-handed talismans on. But they're not doing a whole lot because those only buff physical damage. So, they're not really necessary. They're just extra. And the sword, of course, is the Fire Knight Greatsword, Flame Art infused with the Fire Spear, Ash of War. This is important. And for spells, you mainly just want Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength. And you're a high faith build, so you could have a couple nuke spells in your slots just for fun. But that's really all I'm using is those 2 buffs. So the flow of an invasion will be, you will drink your physic, you will use the 2 buffs, you will buff your sword, and then you will throw a Hefty pot and nuke them with a single R1, and then you can finish them in various ways with the follow-up. You could swap weapons, whatever. Of note, you could go for the crouch poke R1 into dead angled R1 true combo, which is kind of elusive. It's not super consistent, but if you hit that, that's like an automatic death right there. Like you ended it right there and they couldn't do anything about it, so that's awesome. And that's pretty much it. There's nothing really special to it. It is all about the Hefty oil pot, which is being severely overlooked right now. It is so good. And on that note, the people that you're using it against do not really respect it. They don't really know what they're in for when they get hit by a Hefty oil pot or when you're using them. So it is quite easy to use against people in that regard. So guys, I hope you try this out. I think you'll have fun with it. Enjoy.